The moment I saw her storming down the cul-de-sac, clipboard in hand and a scowl that could curdle milk, I knew this was going to be one of those HOA showdowns you hear about but never expect to live through. Karen, because of course it was Karen, was marching straight toward my driveway, pointing at my kids with the intensity of a drill sergeant. "They're breaking the rules," she barked. "I could call the authorities right now." My youngest, barely old enough to ride a bike without training wheels, froze in mid-pedal. My older one clutched the basketball, wide-eyed, unsure whether to defend their turf or run. And there I stood, heart racing, realizing this wasn't just a petty complaint. This was Karen, our HOA's self-appointed enforcer, threatening to ruin a perfectly normal Saturday afternoon because she didn't like the sound of kids laughing. Karen had a long history of overstepping boundaries. Last month, she fined a neighbor for planting flowers too close to the curb. Another time, she threatened eviction over a mailbox that she claimed was out of alignment. But this was different. She was targeting my kids, my family, my home. Before I could even think of responding, my wife stepped forward. Calm, composed, and completely unshakable. She had that "don't even try me" aura that comes from years of experience dealing with city ordinances and enforcement. Karen paused, likely expecting my wife to flinch, but instead she was met with a direct gaze and a quiet, confident voice. "I'd like to see where in the HOA rules it says children can't play in their own yard," she said. Karen sputtered. She waved her clipboard, mumbling something about liability and disturbing the peace. My wife, sensing an opening, pulled out her phone and opened the HOA's official rulebook. Every page was laid bare, every vague clause exposed. There was nothing, absolutely nothing, that prohibited my kids from playing outside on a Saturday afternoon. The tension was thick, almost tangible, as Karen's face went from red to pale. She fumbled with her words, realizing she was losing control of the narrative. My kids, sensing the shift, resumed their game with renewed confidence, and the basketball bounced louder, almost like a victory drum in our quiet neighborhood. It wasn't just about defending our yard. It was about showing that rules exist for everyone, not just for the self-appointed enforcers with too much free time. And in that moment, I realized we had the upper hand, but Karen wasn't going to back down quietly. This fight was just beginning. Karen backed off a few steps, muttering something about neighbors turning a blind eye, while my wife calmly reviewed the HOA documents on her phone. Every time Karen tried to assert authority, my wife countered with facts, citing exact clauses, dates, and prior decisions. It was like watching a master chess player methodically dismantle an opponent's moves. The kids, sensing the shift in power, became more confident. My youngest started dribbling the basketball again, while my older one practiced shots from the driveway. Karen's gaze flicked between them and my wife, frustration mounting. She wasn't just losing the argument. She was losing control, and that for her was unacceptable. "You can't just ignore the rules," Karen snapped, trying to regain some semblance of authority. "This neighborhood has standards." My wife didn't flinch. Instead, she calmly replied, "Standards don't include preventing children from playing in their own yard. If you want to enforce anything, it has to be written in the official HOA rules. And as you can see here," she held up her phone, showing the relevant sections, "there's nothing prohibiting kids from playing outside. Now, if you want to avoid a formal complaint for harassment, I suggest you step back." Karen's face turned crimson. She waved her arms wildly, as if flailing could somehow rewrite the HOA rules in real time. But the neighbors who had begun to gather along their own driveways started whispering among themselves. Eyes on Karen, some nodded at us, silently cheering, while others simply shook their heads in disbelief. Karen was starting to lose her audience, and that audience mattered more than she realized. Just when it seemed she might storm off, she leaned in, voice low and threatening. "I'll find something! You can't just flaunt the rules like this." My wife didn't miss a beat. "Then find it in the written bylaws," she said, her tone as calm as a courtroom judge. "Otherwise, any false accusations could be considered harassment under local law." Karen hesitated. It was clear she hadn't expected her intimidation tactics to be met with both legal knowledge and composure. My kids, emboldened by the support, laughed and ran around the driveway, making it impossible for Karen to claim any disruption. Every bounce of the basketball, every giggle, was a small victory in a battle that Karen didn't even know she was losing. At that moment, I realized something important. Rules matter, but courage, preparation, and staying calm under pressure matter even more. Karen's bluff was crumbling, and we were ready to show her that you can't bully a family that knows their rights. Karen's frustration was now palpable. She shifted from one foot to the other, muttering about community, standards, and responsibility, but her usual confidence had completely vanished. My wife stood her ground, arms crossed, her calm demeanor contrasting sharply with Karen's fiery outburst. The kids continued playing, their laughter echoing through the street like a quiet rebellion, further undermining Karen's authority. It was at that moment that a few neighbors stepped forward. Not aggressively, just supportive, quietly letting Karen know she wasn't as intimidating as she thought. One neighbor even whispered, "You're overreacting, Karen," and her face twisted with disbelief. It was as if the neighborhood itself had quietly chosen sides, and Karen was realizing she was isolated. "You think you're clever, flaunting the rules like this," Karen snapped, but the venom in her voice had dulled. My wife didn't respond immediately. She simply pulled out a printed copy of the HOA rules and placed it on Karen's clipboard. Every line was highlighted. Every loophole Karen had hoped to exploit was laid bare. "I've reviewed the bylaws thoroughly," my wife said slowly, "and there is absolutely nothing that prohibits children from playing in their own yard. Any further attempt to enforce non-existent rules could be considered harassment." Her tone wasn't angry. It was surgical, precise, unshakable. Karen's hands shook slightly as she scanned the highlighted pages. She had expected us to panic, to apologize, to quietly give in. Instead, she was faced with facts, witnesses, and a family who wasn't intimidated. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument Karen could have thrown. Then she tried one last tactic: threats. "I could still call the city inspectors," she said, hoping to reclaim some power. My wife's gaze didn't waver. "You can call them," she said calmly. "But when they arrive, they'll see that the HOA rules are being followed. Any false complaint could backfire legally on you." Karen's shoulders slumped. Her bravado had crumbled entirely. The reality hit her. Her intimidation tactics were useless against knowledge, preparation, and courage. My kids ran past, basketball in hand, triumphant grins on their faces. For them, the battle wasn't over rules. It was about safety, fairness, and standing up when it mattered. At that moment, I realized the lesson we'd just lived. It's not enough to know your rights. You have to be ready to defend them. And sometimes, you need to let a few neighbors quietly witness the truth. Karen had underestimated all of that, and now she was paying the price. Karen's defeat was obvious, but she wasn't ready to leave quietly. Her face was a mixture of anger, embarrassment, and disbelief. She clenched her clipboard like it was a lifeline, as if holding on to it might somehow restore her lost authority. The neighborhood had gone quiet, watching the final act of this suburban showdown, and Karen's sputtering words barely carried over the sounds of my kids' laughter. You'll regret this," she hissed, her voice trembling. But my wife didn't flinch. She calmly stepped forward, closing the gap between them, her presence commanding without being threatening. "I suggest you step back, Karen," she said. "This is your final warning. Any further interference could lead to formal complaints and possibly legal action." Karen's eyes darted around the street, seeing familiar neighbors peeking from behind curtains, leaning out windows, or standing along driveways. There was no support left for her, no allies. Just facts, witnesses, and a family who refused to be intimidated. For the first time, she realized that her reign of petty power had collapsed entirely. Then my kids, fearless and proud, ran past her again, chasing the basketball across the driveway. Their energy, their laughter, was the ultimate proof that Karen's threats were meaningless. She tried to argue, tried to grasp at some shred of control, but every attempt was countered immediately by my wife's calm, precise explanations, each backed by written rules. Karen's frustration grew into resignation. Finally, she muttered something under her breath and stomped back toward her house, clipboard trailing behind her like a defeated flag. The tension in the street lifted instantly. My wife turned to me, smiling slightly, and I knew we had done more than just defend our kids. We had defended common sense, fairness, and the simple right of children to play outside without fear. As the sun started to dip, casting long shadows across the cul-de-sac, the neighborhood slowly returned to normal. The kids played, neighbors waved, and for a moment it felt like we had claimed back not just our driveway, but a sense of justice. Karen may have tried to assert power, but she had underestimated preparation, courage, and the quiet support of a family and community united by reason. This wasn't just a victory over an overbearing HOA president. It was proof that knowing your rights and standing firm can stop even the most relentless bullies. Our kids could play freely, and Karen had learned a hard lesson. You can't intimidate a family that knows the rules better than you do. The driveway echoed with laughter and the sound of bouncing basketballs, a reminder that some battles, once won, leave no room for doubt. We had stood our ground, and we had won. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more wild HOA battles and unbelievable neighborhood dramas, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Drop a comment below and let us know. Have you ever dealt with a Karen like this? And don't forget to smash the like button if you think standing up for your family is always worth it.